Hi, my name's Jason from Forset, and today we're going to talk about interactive maps for storytelling. Today it's going to be broken down into two components. First, we're just going to talk about maps, what makes them up, and show some examples and some tools that you can use. And then after that, we're going to use some tools and actually create a couple interactive maps. All right? So let's get going with the presentation. First, ways to use the maps. First, the most obvious, markers. We use markers for everything, just points on a map, whether it's a photo, an event took place, where a building's located, anything like that, that's for markers. So for example, there's this story. Let me load it up for you. So this story uses points on a map to talk about different aspects. So each of these markers are different points of the story, and as you go through the story, you'll be shown where these markers are. Okay? So the next part, lines and paths. This is pretty obvious, like roads, rivers, a metro line, railroad tunnel, flight path, any kind of line. And so an example of that, this is something we did for a local NGO here in Georgia called Chaikana. And they did a story about some rivers, two rivers that start in Georgia, connect and end up in Azerbaijan. And so we just highlighted the rivers on this map, and you can see with the yellow dots that each of these yellow dots are markers, and they represent points of the story on the map. All right. So that's lines and paths. Next is choropleth. It's a complicated word, but it provides a lot of value. And basically, it color codes an area on the map to give it some kind of a meaning. And this area might either be a regional boundary, like a country, a region, a district, state, something like that. And you've seen it before. It's election results, population size, so on and so forth. So for example, this is an election map that we've created. And so we have this whole website about Georgian election data. And so with this map here, what we're showing is the blue represents Georgian Dream, the red represents UNM. And so everything that's blue indicates where Georgian Dream won, everything that's red represents where UNM won. But you can actually do more than this. So for instance, I'm going to click on Georgian Dream, and this actually shows me what percent of votes they got in each of these districts. So the lighter the color, the less the votes, the darker color, more votes they got. So in this case, you can see that this area here, they got a ton of votes, while down south here in Georgia, Georgian Dream is not so popular. And the nice thing is, creating these color schemes, like from the light to the dark, can be very complicated, of picking the colors and making sure they all work nicely together. And so there's a tool to help you with that. And this tool is called Color Brewer. So if you're going to use a choropleth, I strongly suggest you use Color Brewer. It's very simple. You first just say, okay, how many different variables are you mapping? So let's say we have 5 variables. Then you say, okay, what color do you want? Let's say I want this color. And then right here, you get all the color codes, you're done, you stick them into your application, you're good to go. All right, so you don't have to hire a designer, you don't have to think about it. That's just a very simple tool. And this is what we use to create, where to go? The colors for this selection map. It's the exact same. We use Color Brewer, we stuck it in. We actually had to add a couple more colors, a little darker, but that's what we used, okay? So that's choropleth. So next are heat maps. Heat maps are basically choropleths, but they're not tied to typical regional boundaries. They're much smaller units of scale, such as like a weather map or rainfall. It's not tied to a specific area. It's just, in general, this is what's going on. So like, for instance, this is a high temperature map for the US back in April. And so you can see the state boundaries, but the colors are free to spill over into all the different states. It's not tied to a specific regional boundary. Okay. Now, before moving on into the tools, the important piece that we still have to talk about is the actual map itself, the base layer. Now, when you use a lot of these online tools, it comes with a base layer, and you can use it, you don't have to do anything with it, but many times this base layer is not pretty. There's lots of content on it, like you can see with this map. There's just so much detail. Maybe the colors don't work with your website, and you just want to, it works, but it's not great. So luckily, there's a tool called Mapbox, and Mapbox lets you completely style the map. You can turn features on and off, you can change colors, you can make it all dark, all light, whatever you want. And if the site you're going to use this map on gets access less than 50,000 times a month, you can do it for free. Unfortunately though, if you have a very popular site, you will have to pay to use Mapbox. Now, just to show you an example, if you look at the map here, it's actually the exact same map as the last slide. So I'm going to go back and forth a little bit. So you can see, same map, but this one is just so much information, so much detail that it can be overwhelming. Whereas this map, you still see all the roads, the rivers and everything, but there's just, you don't see the buildings. It's just easier to deal with. It's not as stressful. Okay, so when you use the tools, there are always going to be a map layer. Most of the time you can choose a few different options to change the map layer, and some of them even let you upload your own Mapbox layer. So that's just something you have to look for when you're using the tool. And when I explain the tools next, I'll tell you which ones do or do not allow Mapbox. So let's get into the tools. The first one we're going to talk about is StoryMap. StoryMap lets you build an interactive story where basically you're adding markers to the map, and each marker can have a headline, a description of text. It can also have an image or a video or maybe a social media post to explain something going on, but it's tied to a specific point on a map. The cool thing is it has many base layers you can choose from for your map, and you can also add your own map layer, or sorry, your own Mapbox layer. And then on top of that, they actually have a special feature called Gigapixel. So instead of just the map, if you have an image that for some reason you want to highlight areas on this image, you can do that too. It's a little more complicated, but if that's what you want to do, StoryMap lets you do it. Okay, so here are some examples. This first one is for you Game of Thrones fans out there. Somebody built this based off the books about Arya's journey. And so this is just the beginning of it. You can see all the markers on the map. And then if we click the next button, you actually go into each of the markers. And you can see this one has a video. You can play the video. You can see the title, the summary, and then you just keep clicking next. And you can just go through all the markers, and it just kind of walks you through the map and the story. Okay? So if that's what you're looking for, this can be a very handy, great tool. Now let's look at this example. This is an example of the Gigapixel. So somebody uploaded this image, and so when I click next, it actually zooms in on the image, and so you can see these different areas of the page here. And so as you keep clicking next, it goes through all the different markers, and it's just focusing on this image itself. It's not a map, it's an image, but it's still a great tool to use if that's what you need to do. Okay, so this is StoryMap. The next one is called MapHub, and MapHub is basically you just have a map and you can add features to it, whether it's like markers, lines, text labels, images, shapes. So you can build this map, you add stuff on top to it, and so people can interact with it. You can style it, you can give different colors to the lines and shapes, you can upload different markers. They have many different map base layers, which is great, but unfortunately you cannot load your own Mapbox. But they do have Mapbox built into it for just some of the basic Mapbox styles like light and dark and all that. Okay, so here's an example. Somebody has built a map based off of, I think it's a German zoo. And they're using the map markers to show where all the different animals are. So you can see like here, this is a panda, this is a giraffe. And so if I click on one, they also have an image that's tied to it. Granted, here's the read more. That didn't do anything. But so it's just a simple map with some interactive components on top of it. And that's all. Okay. So that's MapHub. Next is Google Fusion Tables. And to me, Google Fusion Tables is basically Google Spreadsheets on steroids. You could do much more advanced analysis and visualizations, and you could even tie in Google Maps into your visualizations. You can make some very cool interactions. There are tons of online guides about using Fusion Tables, and I have a link here about how to make maps with Google Fusion Tables, but I'm going to stop here with it because when I was researching this, I saw a big warning that at the end of 2019, Google Fusion Tables are going away. So it's there, it can be a useful tool, but it's going away. So probably don't spend too much time on it. Next is Tableau. Tableau is a very amazing data analysis tool. Data scientists world over use it for doing amazing analysis, calculations, visualizations. There's a free version, which is called Tableau Public, but there's also a paid version. So if you don't have the money, you can use Tableau Public, but if you do, you can pay for it. Unfortunately, Tableau has so many options. It can be so complicated and take a long time to learn. I found this link to this online guide about building a map with data, and it's several pages long. So if you are deeply into data analysis, definitely you should check out Tableau. You can try the link here, but if you're just getting started, don't kill yourself with it, all right? And finally, there is Leaflet. Leaflet is a powerful library for building online maps, but you have to know programming skills. You have to know JavaScript in order to use it. So if you are a programmer, by all means, if you're going to build maps on a web page, you should use Leaflet. Leaflet lets you add any kind of markers, lines, shapes. For markers, you can use their default markers, or you can upload your own custom markers. For the base layers, you can use Mapbox or any other ones. And there are tons of online tutorials for it, but since it requires programming skills, I'm not going to go to it at this time. I just wanted to say it's there. So if you have programming skills, check it out. All right? So that's it for the presentation. So now we're going to dive into actually building a story with two different tools that we just introduced. We're going to use StoryMap and we're going to use MapHub. So let's get started. The story itself. The story we're going to do is based off of the 2015 Tbilisi flood. And as of the recording of this, it's actually almost exactly 4 years ago. So that's why it was in my mind. Basically what happened was on the night of the 13th, there was a huge rainstorm. It caused a landslide out west of Tbilisi. The landslide caused the river to swell up and then eventually just went. And it came through Tbilisi, it washed out quite a few homes, a major road, and washed out the zoo. So there are animals like bears, tigers, hippo just walking through the city. So that's the story. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use these two mapping tools just to create a basic story about this idea. So all the text that I'm going to be using for the story is coming from this wiki page here, just so you know. So the first tool we're going to use, before we get started, with the content that's linked to in the description below, there are a few images. StoryMap does let you just provide a URL for an image, but MapHub does not. And so I just provided the images, download them, and then you can use them as part of your story when you follow along. So StoryMap is the first one. So I'm just going to click on StoryMap. And once you're there, just click on the big green button to get started, make a story map. So I'm already logged in. I've already created a story before, but if you haven't logged in, you'll need to log in, create an account. So I'm going to create a new story. And so the first thing it asks you is give it a name. And this name does not appear anywhere in the story. It's basically just the file name. All right? So I'm going to call it the, 2015 Tbilisi flood. Do create. And here we go. So before we get started, let me just explain the layout here. So on the left side is where you have all the slides. So basically every marker on the map they refer to as a slide. It's basically a presentation that just is based on a map. So you can add your slides, and this first slide that you see here is what I call like the title slide, the intro slide. So this is what people are going to see when they first come and look at your map story. So here you can see the map, but you can't place anything on the map yet. For the intro slide, it's all about the text. When you start creating other slides and you put markers on your slides, then when the story starts, it actually is just a highlight of all the markers. So for the title slide, you don't actually place any markers, that comes later. But on the bottom right, you have your headline, you have a text box to enter like a summary or description. Then on the left side is where you can enter your media. So if you can do like a YouTube video or a link to an image, or you can upload an image or a social media post, anything like that, you can paste it in here and it'll automatically embed the content. And then you can add the credit and the caption to go along with it, okay? So before we get started, let's look at the options. So in the top left corner is the options, and I just want to quickly go through these. So the story map size, this is more about when you're sharing, what size you want it to be, like if somebody embeds it. So for now, we can ignore it. The language indicates like the controls that are on the map, like the next previous links and whatnot. What language should those controls be in? So I'm just going to stick with English, but it actually has quite a few languages here. You can change the font. So the treat as, this is where you tell it if you're doing a map or if you're doing the image that we talked about before. So if you do want an image, you can just click on this guy. But if in this case, we're just sticking with the map, so we're going to leave that. Call to action, you'll see this in a minute after we finish the first slide. This is basically a button that appears on the first slide. That's like in this case, the default text is start exploring. You can change the text if you want to use the button. You don't have to, because that next, the little arrow button for the next is already there. So it's up to you whether or not you want it. So I'll just leave it. And then this last one is map type, and this is where you can actually change the base layer. So they have lots of these Stallman maps. They have OpenStreetMaps, and then if you pick Mapbox, it's going to ask you to enter your ID from Mapbox and which map you want to use. And then if you're doing the image upload, this is where you pick GigaPixel. For us, for right now, we're going to start with OpenStreetMaps because I find it easier to find places on the map because you have all the roads, all the villages and everything. But once your story is done, the map itself is not that pretty, so you can always go back and change to a different map. But we're just going to start with this map just to help us find the places for our markers. All right? So pick OpenStreetMaps, and then let's click Close. So you can see the map has changed, and let's get started. So all of the text for these stories is located inside this Google document. So if you can see here, the first slide. So here's the headline. So if you're following along, just copy paste. Okay, so here's the headline. Here's the summary. Then for the image, we're going to use the intro image. So I'm going to say upload, choose. Here's the intro image. And then for credit, this image I took from NBC News. And then I'll just add a little caption that this is a hippo loose in Tbilisi. Okay, so this is an intro slide. We are done. And so up here in the middle of the page at the top, there's a preview button. So if you click on it, you'll see what it's going to look like. Now, right now, because we have not placed any markers, the map itself is not showing. But you can still see the image and our text, and then the start exploring. This is the call to action button that we saw in the settings. So if you want that, you can keep it. You can change the text if you want, or you can turn it off. Okay, but for now, I'll just leave it. So that's our start. So let's go back to edit, and let's add a new slide. So for this new slide, we're going to talk about how did the flood happen. So let's put in the headline, what caused the flood. Copy the summary text. Again, all this text is from the Wikimedia page. And then for this one, we're actually going to do a YouTube link. So I'll paste in the YouTube link. And then this is from the website called Agenda G, that's here in Georgia. Okay. Now it's time to place the marker on the map. Okay. So for this, unfortunately, at least for Georgia, many places are not easy to find when you're searching. It might be different in more Western countries. And so this is a village that is near the river where it flooded. So we're going to start there and then move the marker up to the river. Okay. So copy the name, and if you notice here on the map, there's now a search box. So paste the village name in there, and the one that we want is this one, the Cavemo Cartley. So we select that, it's going to zoom it in, and so if I move the map a little bit, this over here is Tbilisi, okay? So the flood started in the western area, but this is not exactly where we want. So I'm going to zoom in. And if you click on the marker, you can move it wherever you want. And so I'm just going to drop it on the river. For this example, exactly where the landslide occurred is not important. So I'm just going to stick it somewhere on the river itself. All right? So at this point, we've created a first slide. So let's take a look. So here we go. We got our map. We got our marker on the map that shows this is where the event took place. We have our video and then the title and the summary description. And if you want, on this top left, you can see this back to the beginning. This will actually show you the full story. So you can see here, we only have one marker, so the map is showing for this one marker. Then if you click the next button, you actually go into the page. All right, so first slide done, let's keep going. So for the next slide, we're going to talk about the damage and what damage was done. So again, let's copy in the text. Okay. And now for this one, we're going to load the image called damage. So upload an image, choose file, damage, upload. All right, so the image is loaded. All right, so we've entered the content, now we need to find the place, and that place is Vakhey. So enter Vakhey, and you want to select the first one, that's Tbilisi, Georgia. And again, Vakhey is not what we actually want, we want to get a little bit closer, so let me zoom in. So if you notice right above the map marker is this park, and that's where we want to put the map marker. So just move the marker up into the park, and we're done. Okay, so let's do the preview. Let's see how it looked. So we have some images, or an image of the damage. We have some text, and we can see where on the map this took place. Cool, all right. So we're gonna add one more slide. So let's go back to edit. Let's add a slide. And this time we're gonna talk about what happened with the zoo. So I'm gonna copy the text in. Okay, the image is called zoo. Choose zoo. Okay, so we have the content. Now, this location up here, just above the park, is where the zoo is located. So the marker, they just place by default where the last marker was. So we don't need to do a search. We can just simply drag it to the new location. So just take it and drag it and drop it on the zoo. Hey, there we go. So the marker is there. And so now our story is done. So let's go ahead and do the preview again. So now we can see the zoo here. We can show it highlighted on the map. So let's do the back to the beginning so you can see the full story. So on the map, we have a summary of all our markers. Unfortunately, it doesn't do a good job of showing it, but they are all there. And then you can just go through it. So you see what caused the flood, the damage, and then the zoom. So it's a short story, but I think you get a good idea of how it works. So the final thing to do now is to share it. And so up in the top right corner is a share link. You click on there and you have two options. You can either just get a link so that you can share it on social media. So that's what this first link is for. Or if you scroll to the bottom, you can get the embed code. So you can take this, put it in your organization's website, your blog, whatever it might be, and then you can embed this story map directly inside your site. So that's it. That's it for Story Map. So let's now go on to the Map Hub so you can compare and see how Map Hub works. Then in the top right corner is a link called New Map. Go ahead and click on it. If this is the first time for you, you'll have to create an account. I already have one, so I'm bypassing that. So you might want to pause the video while you're creating an account, but once you're done, let me now explain how this interface works, okay? On the left side, you have the search box. So like if I do a search for Tbilisi, then I'll go to Tbilisi. So the toolbar along the left side, the first icon is just your simple pointer so you can move the map around and interact with the map. Then after that, you get where you can add things. So this one is you can add a map marker, you can draw a line, you can draw a shape, you can add a text, or you can add an image, all right? And then on the right side, this info tab is where you can just give a title and description for your overall map. And then the visibility, so while you're working on it, keep it private, but if you're done and you're gonna share it, you need to make sure you set it to public, okay? The item, there's nothing here yet, but once we place something on the map, this is where we're gonna customize all the options, like set the title, description, colors, blah, blah, blah. And base map, this is where you can actually change the base map. So there's lots of options here, like there's a few different map hubs, Thunder Forest and some other ones. So we're just gonna stick with the classic for now, but if you want, you can play with it and see what you want to choose. So for now, let's go ahead and get started and let's give it a title. And again, all of the text is in the document, so you can just copy paste. So where is the start? Here it is. So the 2015 Tbilisi flood is the title. Description. Okay. So now we have the basic information about our map. So now let's get started. The first thing we want to do is add a marker of where the landslide occurred. So let's click on marker, and let's actually do a search. We're going to search for that same village we did in the last part. Where's the name of it? Here it is. Okay. So paste it in there. And when you enter the text, you have to press enter to get possible matches. And then once you find one, in this case, I want the second one, Deedgori region. So click on it. It's going to go there. And even though this isn't exactly where we want it to be, you have to click add. And then once you add it, over in the item tab is where you can change things. And so the first thing we want to do is click on this icon to move the marker. So I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to zoom out because the river is up above. So there's the river. I'm going to move the map marker up here. So I'll put it here. Then click the icon again to save it. And there we go. So I'm going to go back to the Google Doc, and I'm going to get the text. So I'm going to do a landslide. It's the title. So the description, and then for a link, we're going to put in the YouTube link again, because I want you to see what it does when you add a link. So here's the YouTube link, and if you see, all it does, it just adds this little icon. So it doesn't actually show videos inside of here. It's just going to open a new page, and then you can see it there. So it's not as cool as the story map, but you can still put links and other stuff here if you so desire. Then finally, if you scroll down, you can see you can change the color of the marker, you can change the icons. So just to do it, I'm going to change the marker to red. And there we go. There's our first marker. All right. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a line. So if I zoom out just a little bit, you can see the river here. This is the river. It's coming down and it goes through the city. And so what we want to do is draw a line that kind of shows where the river is located. So I'm going to click on the river, on the line. And the way it works is you click where you want to start. Okay, so I'm going to start it on the marker. And then when you move your cursor, you'll see that there's this dashed line following your cursor around. So you just you can put as many points as you want. So I'm going to put it here. I'm going to say it goes to here, goes down, and down, and up. And then it just goes this way, and then it goes down, then it hits the main river. Okay? So just in general, this is the path of the river. And once you're done, you press either the Enter key or the Escape key, and it's going to save your line. All right? And so there's our line. And then just like with the map marker, you can do title and description. So the title is going to be the flood path. And there's the description. And there we go. So if you notice, it doesn't wrap the text, it just kind of fills up the whole screen. So if you actually want to force the text to wrap, so the pop-up box is not so big, you put the cursor in the text box where you want it to wrap, and you press Shift and Enter. So for instance, I want it to do it after the word Vera River. So I'm going to Shift Enter. And now if you see in the pop-up, it actually wraps. So I'm going to do it again after Tbilisi, and then I'll do it again after the word river. Okay? So you can do this wherever you want. You don't have to, but the option is there if you want to do it. All right? And so again, we can change colors. It's a river, it's blue, it's good for me, so I'm going to keep it. So for me, this river is done. All right? So now the next thing we want to do is highlight the area of where the major flooding took place. And to do that, we're going to use the shape icon. And so I'm going to zoom in on the map towards the end here. And so this is the same park from the story map. So I want to highlight this park and just this whole area here. So just like the line, you click to start it, and then you just keep clicking to put points in. The shape of the map can be whatever you want it to be, however detail-oriented you want to get, but I'll make mine like this. Once you're done, you press Enter or Escape. There's the area, and just to make it a little bit different, I'll make it orange. And for the text, we're going to give it area of major damage. Okay. I'm going to skip the description for now, but this is just nice. It's just saying this is where the major damage occurred. All right. So just to kind of show you what we have before moving on, if we zoom out a bit. So we have this map marker, we have this line representing the river, and then we have this shape that represents the area of major damage. So now what we want to do is add an image on the zoo, just to show that this is where the zoo was and this is what it looked like. Okay? So let's zoom back in. So on my computer, when I've done this in the past and I try to add an image on top of a shape, it doesn't work very well. It actually tries to change the shape. So what I'm going to say is, if you notice on the bottom right side, you have these layers on the map. And just like anything with layers, like in Photoshop, Illustrator, anything like that, you have these eye icons. So you can turn these guys on and off. So since the zoo is right here, and it's covered by this area of major damage, I'm going to go ahead and turn it off so that I can load this image. And then once the image is loaded, I'm going to turn it back on. Okay? So I'm going to click image. I'm going to browse. I'm going to select the zoo. Okay? So by default, this the way MapHub works is it tries to look at the metadata to see if it actually has geolocation on the image. If it does have geolocation, then it's actually going to automatically place the marker. But if it doesn't, then you can place it yourself by clicking on the place image. So let's go ahead and do that. And then I'm just going to click here on the zoom. And there's our image. So if we want, we can add more text. Let's see, do I have text? Title, Zoo is flooded. And then we have a description. Okay, and now just to see what happens, I'm going to change the color to this purple color. So it's changing the marker color to this purple color, all right? So at this stage, our map is done. We have the exact same content as Story Map, it's just different. Instead of just having points on a map, we can actually have points, but also lines and shapes and images and everything else. And actually, I need to turn the shape back on. Okay, there we go. So this is our map. Important part, click save. I don't think it does an autosave, so you have to make sure you click save so that everything is properly saved. So, last thing you want to do, share the map. It actually took me a while to find this because it's usually very big and obvious, usually at the top, but it's actually hidden down here on the right side, the share image. So with this, you have the link that goes directly to this page, or you can get the embed code. So just like Story Map, you can just link to it, or you can get the embed code and put it in your existing page, your existing site. And that's it. So thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful, and I'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.